Hi, and welcome to the Silicon Insider podcast. Hey, Scott, how are you?
Good, Mike. Hi.
We're going into the holidays. Well, you've already been through one, so you looking forward to it? Of course,
Yeah, it's
you're the guy that goes and does the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day broadcast.
right.
So you're
It's
the,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
I'll
you're
be
the
working.
most beloved guy at the station.
If it were that way, but busy time. There's always news, so yeah,
Okay, so I think this is the last one before the new year.
that's
So
right.
let's get right to it.
All right.
Okay, inflation in November just came out today. Inflation in November fell to 2.7%. The Bureau of Labor Statistics said today that that was a positive sign for consumers on its face. But there are some questions. This is the first real report after the lockdown. So it's based on September numbers on the terms of the drop. And it may also be influenced by the fact that they reported late because of that, gathering all that information. So this number may be a bit contaminated by Christmas sales and discounts. So we won't really see the real deal probably until end of December.
Right. A lot of these numbers get revised anyway, and the
Yeah.
same for sort of the job numbers and the latest job numbers we got also sort of said, well, this is what we think October was, and now we know what November was. And even then, a lot of the economists were saying it's likely that these will get revised. So we're sort of going on vibes right now, but the vibes are not all that bad. And this is something I think we can say here in the Bay Area more than in most places. But if you go to the malls these days, they're really busy. People are shopping both online and in the physical world.
Which, you know, the first reaction is that's because the inflation numbers are looking good. But even if it's just a kind of a delusion about just how good it is, that alone is enough to keep people shopping.
Right. I don't know that the average consumer is looking deeply into the inflation numbers before they decide, that they're going to do Christmas shopping. I think there's some optimism. There's a desire to please your family and your loved ones and to say, hey, there's been some up and downs, but most people have jobs. And so they're saying, I've got a little bit of income. I can buy some presents. I can do some Christmas shopping. And that is really what fuels the economy so much.
Well, the big concern has been food, and it was in September it rose at a 3.1% annual rate. This week, the news was it had slowed to 2.6%. So that seems to be good news. Housing was increasing at 3.6%, and it's down to 3.0. However, energy prices have soared 4.2% over the last 12 months. So energy is getting more expensive, and we'll get to something about energy pretty soon, but it's pretty good numbers. Uh, I'm not sure it was worth the speech we got last night or Wednesday night about how great everything was, but it sure seems to underscore that maybe things are turning for the best.
Yeah, and I don't know that they were all that bad before. In the
Yeah.
last couple of years, since we got rid of that sort of post-pandemic inflation shock, I think we've looked at a decent employment picture, a good employment picture. We've seen some wage increases, and even with a lot of layoffs in areas like tech and some of the other areas, for the most part, our jobless rate, which is what 4.6%, I believe it reached as a country, higher than we've seen in a few years, but historically still low, gives people reason for optimism. Even if they're worried about the future, they're saying, right now, things are good. I'm making a living. I've got a job. And inflation is not killing my household income because we've seen inflation creeping higher, not shooting higher for a few years now. And so it seems like the conditions are still pretty good for people shopping, whether at the grocery store or for Christmas presents, at the mall.
Well, the big one is wage increases now seem to be outracing inflation rate, which always seems to be a cause for optimism and spending.
Right. And I think optimism is really what's driving this more than any particular figure that you dig into. I think people are saying, I've got what I need to buy my family presents, so I'm going to hit the mall or hit, online shopping. And there may be a hangover post, Christmas that we wake up from and say, we spent what on our credit cards? But for the most part, I think people are feeling, when it comes down to whether or not to shop, I think they're feeling pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Stocks dropped sharply Wednesday on jitters once again about the AI bubble. And leading the way was Oracle. And apparently, Oracle, they've just lost, well, Blue Owl, which is the leading primary banker for Oracle's big data center projects, pulled out. And that's a $10 billion data center, puts that in limbo. That's in Michigan because the funding talks stalled. And Oracle, in a statement, said, well, no, that Financial Times story was incorrect. Now, having been a PR guy way long ago in the last century, when a company gets bad news and they say the news story was incorrect, that means there was a semicolon missing. That they reserve the right to say something was incorrect if anything was grammatically wrong with the story. However, Oracle has confirmed that Blue Owl was not going to be that part of the funding talks. So there seems to be a little bit of backlash about these giant data centers and the sheer cost of them. What do you think is causing? Yeah.
Oh no, I was just going to say you're right. It's not just the data centers. It's the idea that these companies had to be so perfectly aligned and perform so perfectly that even a rumor, not to mention a deal falling through, is really going to hurt your stock price. Look what Oracle did when it announced all that good news during that earning report. Stock shot up more than $100 in a single day.
Yeah.
And then the news just sort of crept out that it looked like things were a little too frothy for Oracle. And then the news was bad for Oracle. And now the stock is down close to 50% from its high, maybe 40, 45% from that high. And that's a lot to lose. But it really felt like it was a lot to gain. Like these AI valuations just got out of control for some of these companies, including Oracle.
Okay, related to that, there's been a year-long policy debate that revolving around a request to generate more electricity for Amazon's artificial intelligence campus in Pennsylvania. This is called co-locating. And what Amazon wanted was to be able to tap into or even control a nearby power plant. I think I don't see the location, but the FEC was going to have a meeting about it today, whether to accept the idea of major data centers sharing essentially or tapping into local power plants instead of having to go to the statewide or the regional grid for electricity. Is there any news on that? I mean, it was still breaking earlier today.
No, I mean, I think it's still early to figure out how these companies are going to get their energy. For us here in the Bay Area, it's PG&E, and PG&E has said we look to increase capacity because a lot of these Silicon Valley companies are going to want extra power, and they're going to look to their local utility for that. How much they can get, I don't know. We've heard of the Googles of the world trying to, buy up nuclear power plants and nuclear power companies that are making the little plants. And so there's going to be a run on energy, I think. And I don't know exactly where that run will take these companies, but reading up on AI, you realize just how much energy these companies need to power what they want to power.
See, I think that's the story of the 2030s, which is going to be the fight between consumers and these AI companies. It's going to be like, well, do you want to get all that power that Chat GPT 13,
Right.
14, or do you want to have your lights on? And it's going to be a big battle because right now we don't know how that demand from AI is going to be answered.
I think the battle will be over power and water in communities. I agree.
Yeah. Interestingly, uh, the Trump family with their Bitcoin uh, business, they made a major took a major position in a fusion power company. It just the other day, and there's some question. One argument is they're just tapping into the newest version of AI or what they think they is, so they can go public with their Bitcoin company that isn't doing that well, or they see the next step that fusion is going to have to be the uh, the solution to the AI power problem.
We'll see. I mean, the Trump media company merged with a fusion company. And so now all of a sudden Trump Media, which is essentially Truth Social, is talking energy. So that's the bizarro world we're in, but it's happening on Wall Street now.
Yeah, and when does it get to the point that you know we start looking into the fact that the administration, the president of the United States, is taking positions in all of these commercial industrial enterprises? At what point does he begin to influence, uh, the competition in that world?
I mean, I think that horse is kind of out of the barn. I mean, look at Nvidia in China, look at Intel's bounce back. I think Washington and that the administration is having some influence on
Yeah.
what these companies do. How could they not? They're in some cases fairly major shareholders.
Well, it's been presented very carefully, but what point does it become a monopolistic, predatory enterprise?
I'm sure there are lawyers to make sure that the monopoly part doesn't happen, that there's no majority in this, but they're influential. And I think when you see, oh, Amazon did something and then didn't do something because Trump didn't want them to do it, or Nvidia is not, is back in China, these things are geopolitical decisions and tech companies are involved and the administration is pulling some strings, certainly because they own shares in these companies.
I understand that, but there's a difference between geopolitical diplomacy and personal wealth.
Yes, that's true as well. I don't want to get into conspiracy theories here. I'm just saying what we do see, which is if you have a stake in a company, you have a say in that company. And yes, it's unusual for the government to have that stake and therefore that say, but that's what's going on. And it's not necessarily even going on behind closed doors. These are things that are being
Yeah.
talked about.
And they
And
claim, well, we don't have a board position, that sort of thing. Okay, well, we'll see. We got to keep a close eye on that one. All right. Instacart has been ordered to pay $60 million to settle FTC claims it deceived customers. I think we're going to see a lot. Well, it's really a question now because the uh, the FTC, the SEC, they seem to be pulling back on what we thought was going to be a lot of antitrust action now. And they've lost a couple cases and they seem to be waved off. And I wonder which direction they're being waved off from, a lot of that source of that. Or they just beat, they've seen the precedent and they're just not going to pursue it anymore.
I mean, hard to say because they've lost some, but they've won some. I mean, $60 million against Instacart for allegedly deceiving customers is what the FTC is there for,
Yeah.
and to protect consumers, and so they're out there still flexing some muscles. But right, it's going to be interesting if they're trying to take on companies that the federal government has a stake in. But Instacart is not one of them. So Instacart,
Yeah,
yeah.
it seems to me they're just kind of hitting around the edges and they don't want to take on the big boys anymore. By the way, the agency alleged that Instacart used a number of deceptive tactics in its subscription signups and satisfaction guarantee advertising, which caused consumers to pay more in fees and prevented them from securing refunds. Well, that's just fraud. But I think there's a lot of that going around out there. If people look, people look closely. I hear complaints every day. Okay, Apple announced it will allow alternative app stores in Japan and will permit developers to process payments for digital goods and services outside of its own app purchase system in iOS. Well, speaking of monopolies and guarded walls, but this is interesting, and apparently it's because the country has a new Mobile Software Competition Act, which is just now going into effect. That essentially opens up these trusts or pseudo trusts. Interesting. You think other companies or countries will follow this model?
Possibly, and it behooves Apple to figure out how this works, because remember, because of the Epic case, they may have to loosen some of the strings on even their app store here in the US and how it charges money. And yes, I think other countries will be doing this in their own way. We've seen not only China, but Europe, various countries in Europe, especially the UK, say, hey, we want to do this our way to protect our customers. And if you want to be in our country, you have to comply with these rules. And, these tech companies want to be everywhere all at once. And so they may have to get a little bit flexible now and then.
Okay. And finally, 2 reports just came out about the use of artificial intelligence. One is about adults and one is about young kids. The first one is 1 in 3 adults in the United Kingdom are using artificial intelligence for emotional support or social interaction, according to research published by a government body. 1 in 25 people turn to the technology for support or conversation every day. Okay, that's the first one. That one's a little disturbing, but it was kind of predictable. But the second one is terrifying. A new report conducted by the digital security company Aura found a significant percentage of kids who turn to AI for companionship are engaging in violent role play, and that violence, which can include sexual violence, drove more engagement than any other topic kids were engaged with. Porn has always driven every technology consumer revolution we've ever had was pornography, but these are kids that are 5 to 17. They polled 3,000 children, and they found that 42% of minors turned to AI specifically for companionship or conversations designed to mimic lifelike social interactions or role play scenarios. And this was across 90 different chatbot services. And 42% of the kids turning to chatbots for companionship, 37% engaged in conversations that depicted violence, which researchers defined as interactions involving themes of physical violence, aggression, harm, or coercion. And that includes sexual or non-sexual coercion, including descriptions of fighting, killing, torture, or non-consensual acts. Now, we just saw in Australia that they're banning access to social networks for young kids. Is this going to, this can't go on. This is like rehearsing for crime, for violent crime by young kids from ages where they're not just impressionable, they're completely impressionable. They're still deciding how the world really works and how they should behave in it.
Well, and we're deciding how much access to those kids AI should have. On the side of, the concern, I would say, these AI companies should step up their security. After all, many of them want to go public. Many of them want to, get a wider audience. And a lot of parents are going to be upset when they see this. On the downside, if you're worried about this, I would give you the last 10 years of social media, which has proven that in many countries, including our own, these stats don't change anything. We still invest in these companies. We still make these guys rich, and we still allow them to essentially prey on kids and use kids' data, and kids suffer for it. So I don't have an answer other than I hope the protection against some of these chatbots is stronger by a lot than the protection that we afforded kids when it came to social media.
Yeah, I mean, we're letting a lot of this go by. And I mean, it's not, I think older folks think, oh, it's just like looking up dirty words in the dictionary, it's harmless. But this isn't harmless. This
Right.
is actually creating realistic scenarios acted out by, AI imagery doing terrible things.
Yes, and it's dangerous for young people. We've seen that, but so has social media. And I don't know what the straw will be that breaks the camel's back, but my concern is that because we've been so lax with social media, we will let these AI chatbots, have access to our kids as well, and therefore these big companies will, and that's dangerous on several levels.
Well, if it passes any precedent, it's going to take a catastrophe to
That's true.
make everybody put it back on the front burner of debate. So we'll see. Anyway, that's not a happy note to end on, but you can see Scott on you can see him every day on NBC Bay Area every weekday, and also on X and on Facebook, and you can see me. I don't know. You can see me right now. That's about the most of it for the moment. Uh, Everybody have a great weekend and have a happy holidays, and we'll see you all in a few weeks. Bye bye.